Hey chess enthusiasts, Francis here again. Today I'm going to share a video about the Sicilian Scheveningen and what we are going to do if we're confronted with the English attack. Our variation will begin at move 8. So our variation is e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop e3, e6, f3. So we will start here. After f3, our response is b5. This is part 1. We will discuss white's move g4, and later in part 2, queen to d2, and in part 3, h3. So let's try first. This is in this part 1, g4. After g4, our response is an immediate b4. So if the knight moves to e2, our response is h6. So after h6, white has several options. He may play an immediate h4, or he may play bishop g2, or he may challenge the pawn push on b5 with the move c4. So let's begin with h4. After h4, our response is an immediate e5, and after knight f5, we push our d5 pawn. So if white takes, e takes d5, our response is knight takes d5. After bishop to f2, we have bishop to b7. After bishop to g2, we have knight to d7. If white chooses queen to d2, we have queen to c7. And after white castles on the queen side, we have g6, kicking away the white knight. Then after knight to e3, we have knight takes e3 and bishop takes e3. And after that, we can safely triple castle. If white immediately castles, we have g6, kicking away the knight. But if the knight does not move, and instead an f4 move is made, we have knight to c5. Then after knight to c5, white may retreat, knight to e3, and we have knight takes e3, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, and after bishop takes e3, we have bishop takes g2, and after king takes g2, we have h5, trying to fix the pawn, g5, and after g5, we cannot, bishop to g2 is immediately desirable, but we cannot do that first because our knight is hanging. So we first move knight to e6, then after rook a to c1, we have e takes f4, and after knight takes f4, we have bishop to g7 now. After knight takes e6, we have f takes e6, and if he moves with bishop to c5, we have rook to c8, and after bishop takes b4, we have the good move rook to c4, having a double attack with the bishop and the pawn on h4. After c3, we have rook takes h4, which is good for black. If white moves c3, we have b takes c3, and after b takes c3, we have rook to f8, which is a good position for black. And b3 is bad because we have rook to f8. Here, if instead of rook to c1, white moves f5, we have G takes f5, and after rook takes f5, we have rook to c8, which is good for black because we are measuring the c2 pawn. Let's go back to move 10. So in move 10, if instead of an immediate h4, white plays bishop to g2, we have bishop to b7, and after queen to d2, we have knight bd7. And here, if white plays h4, we have an immediate e5, and after knight f5, we have d5, and after g5, we have d4, which is desirable for black. So black may take, white may take. After white takes our knight on e4, we have our g6, and after knight g7, we have bishop takes g. If white takes our knight, we have knight takes f6, and after bishop to c5, we have queen takes d2, and after king takes d2, we have a5. And after a3, we have knight d7, and after bishop to e3, we have b takes a3, rook takes a3, bishop to f8, rook b3, and after bishop to c6. This is fine for black. Here, black may also take the bishop. After g takes f6, we have knight takes f6, which is fine for black. After g5, instead of pushing the d4 pawn, may offer h takes d5, and after h takes g5, black takes the rook on h1, and after bishop takes f1, then we can push the d4. After bishop to f2, we have knight to h5, and after triple castle, we have g6, which is fine for black. And if black auto take, b takes d4, we have g6. After g takes f6, we have g takes f5, bishop f2, and f takes e4, f takes e4, queen takes f6. We have triple castle and triple castle. And the resulting position is so complicated, and it is very difficult for black. So in this position, an immediate d4 is recommended. So let's go back to move 12. If instead of h4, white chooses to play positional with knight to g3, our response is d5, and after castle, we have d takes e4, and after knight takes e4, we have bishop takes e4, and f takes e4, we have knight takes g4, which is very good for black. If the queen takes our pawn on b4, we have queen to c8. And here, white has so many queen moves. If white plays queen to a5, we have d5, and after d5, we have triple castle for white, and after d takes e4, f takes e4, bishop to c5, king to b1, castle, and then g5. After g5, white is trying to continue his attack. We have h takes g5, and after h4, we simply ignore the h4 pawn and push forward our g pawn to the g4 square. If white plays queen to a4, our recommended move is e5. After knight to f5, we have d5, and after e takes d5, we have g6, and after Knight f g3, we have knight takes d5, and after bishop to f2, we have rook to b8. After knight to b3, we have bishop to c6, and after queen to c4, we have d5. After e takes d5, we have bishop takes d5. After queen takes c8, we have rook takes c8, knight c3, bishop to a3, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop to c1, bishop takes b2, bishop takes b2, and rook takes c2. And this is very good for black. After queen to b3, we have d5. After triple castle, d takes e4, f takes e4, knight c5, which is good for black. Finally, after queen takes d2, we have d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5, knight to f4, and rook to b8, knight takes d5, and bishop takes d5, which is good for black. So let's go back to move 10. If instead of h4 or bishop to g2, white may challenge our pawn push on b4 with c4, and our response is e5. If white goes to f5, we have g6, kicking away the knight, and after knight fg3, we have bishop to e6. After h4, we have knight to c6. Then after h5, we have knight to d7, which is good for black. If instead of knight f5, knight to c2 is played, we have a5. After bishop to f2, we have bishop to e6, and after knight to e3, we have knight fd7. After h4, we have knight to c5. After knight to g3, we have g6. After knight d5, we have knight to c6. And finally, to the very beginning of our variation, if instead of knight c to e2 on move 9, white opts for knight to a4, we have bishop to d7, and after c4, we have h6 and h4. We have the bishop to e7. If white chooses h5, we simply castle. After g5, we take the pawn, which takes g5, and after a6, we have g6. And this is somewhat scary but safe for black. If instead of pushing the pawn, white plays bishop takes g5. We have queen to a5, and after rook to g1, we have bishop takes a4. The knight is actually hanging, so white here will move b3, which is good for black. Here, instead of an immediate h5, white may offer bishop to e2. Here we have our knight to c6. And if white captures our knight, we have bishop takes c6, which is good for black. After knight to c2, we have knight to e5, and after knight b6, we have rook to b8, and after knight takes d7, we have knight x takes d7, and after f4, we have knight to c6, bishop f3, e5, f5, bishop takes h4, check, king to f1, and this is good for black. And that's it. I hope you win many blitz games using the Sicilian SCHEVENINGEN. even against the English attack. So the Sicilian is very complicated. We're just trying to find good moves here, not necessarily the winning moves. Thank you.